way south down towards Cornwall again, and I've made a couple of videos already, so I think what I'll probably do is stick them together and make one long southbound one. So this is the first one you'll hear, I'm guessing, but there'll actually be the third one that I've made. Anyhow, I'm not in a very good mood today, so I don't think I'll be putting any jokes in, so enjoy if you can. I made a video yesterday called Monetizing YouTube, where I was just putting forward some ideas about how we might inject some capital into the system so that we can decide what we value using kind of interpersonal means rather than the means that Google uses. And there's some good responses to that. I was very grateful for some of the comments and the discussions around it. So I just wanted to reflect on what I'm thinking about so far with that. I mean, some of the comments were interesting, were to do with, you know, people would not pay for something that they currently get for free, you know, kind of versions of that. Or there's nothing on YouTube that's worth paying for, it should all be free, as some people said. Or Mel said that she didn't feel her own content had any value. The implication being it's only worth something when it's free. And I think that's really interesting and important. But of course, the way I look at it at least, it isn't free right now. I mean, we're paying for the content on YouTube. We're just paying for it indirectly. I mean, obviously, it's obvious, I suppose, but you know, YouTube is a commercial organisation. It's trying to make a profit. I don't know if it is in profit yet, but it certainly has its ambition. And the way it largely gains that profit is through advertising revenues. And so every time, you know, we are paying for YouTube, but we don't pay for it directly. We pay through it indirectly through the various goods and services that we buy, which advertise themselves on YouTube. As I'm sure it's, you know, patently obvious to many other people, those goods and services are increasingly targeted better and better. For example, you know, I was looking a couple of weeks ago at flights to Stockholm, so I've got this conference to go to at the end of May, and now everywhere I go on Google and YouTube, there's adverts for cheap flights to Stockholm, or hotels in Stockholm, or, you know, various stuff to do with Sweden. It just keeps appearing as part of the advertising background to my experience. And at some point or other, of course, I will probably be using one of those services. You know, I will be using one of those airline companies, or I will be staying in one of those hotels. And when I do that, part of the payment that I will be making for that service is the advertising budget that that company has used, which it's spending on Google, you know, which Google is profiting from. So I am actually paying for it, and we all are. We just don't pay for it directly. We pay for it indirectly through that way, really. I mean, the psychology of that is really interesting, I think. There's a guy called Dan Ariely, I think he's called, or Dan Ariely, something like that it's pronounced, who's on YouTube. He's I think he's a behavioural economist, or he studies the psychology of economic behaviours. Really interesting stuff, and he talks a lot about that, about how we get almost fetishistic about money that changes hands directly, you know, hard currency. You take a coin or a note out of your pocket and you hand it over. We get very, very vigilant about that process. But if something's taken out of our back pocket or through a series of intermediaries, you know, we'll just let it fly away. We just don't care. We don't seem to notice. It doesn't affect our psychology in the same way. And I think this is an example of that. I'll put a link to Dan Ariely's channel, actually, because it's quite good. And he did a really good TED talk about this very subject. But yeah, I think that's one of the things that's going on here, is we don't recognise that we are paying for it. We don't have the right psychology to recognise that. And so when someone like me suggests, oh, would it be interesting to pay $10 a month for this content? I think that's fucking outrageous. And of course we are really already paying far more than that through increased costs for everything we buy. And yeah, but it's a valid comment, you know what I mean? And to make any kind of scheme like the one I'm talking about work, you'd have to address that aspect of people's experience. You know, you would. It's just a fact. The other thing, which I think is kind of related to that, which a couple of people said, was that they would feel compromised, or they would feel funny about putting money into a system and it all flowing to a content provider. You know what I mean? Like given this is a relatively flat platform, at least we like to think it is, in which most of us, or many of us, are content providers or commenters, or we have that kind of notionally democratic status, that the idea that we would pay cash to some great and good content provider feels a bit weird, you know, that we would, that their coffers would fill at the expense of our viewing experience. And I think that's, again, completely valid interpretation of what would happen. But of course we're already doing that, aren't we? I mean, we call these people partners, and I speak as a partner myself, that if you're a partner, your aim and the tools you're given, the advice you're given, from what I understand if you go to partner meetings, I've never been to one, but the advice you're given is all about, you know, maximising eyeballs on your page, maximising the number of subscriptions and views you get, ultimately to lead to better advertising revenue, more clicks, so that you as a partner profit. So again, it's not free, you know. It just channels a little bit of that cash away from the advertisers, or skims a tiny percentage off the advertising revenue and passes it to partners. So that's already in place, you know what I mean? So unless we're all saying we want to boycott partner channels, which, you know, could be something to do, to avoid any kind of financial value siphoning itself towards one particular individual, then again, that's a piece of psychology to deal with, a piece of behavioural economic psychology to deal with, rather than a true reflection of what's going on, I think. Actually, just on that partnership thing, if anybody knows of a way to give your partnership back, please let me know, because I became a partner a while back. I did apply for partnership. It was at a time when you couldn't make videos longer than 15 minutes, or maybe it was in 11 minutes then, I think, unless you were a partner. And there were one or two other advantages to do with, well, I can't remember, something to do with channels on your page or something. You couldn't have channels on your page referring to somebody else unless you were a partner. And I particularly wanted the opportunity to make longer videos, but I've never actually monetized any of my videos, I don't think. And it wouldn't be a point anyway, you know, my videos don't get that many views anyway. But so if anybody knows how to hand the partner thing back, that'd be great, because I don't really like it. I feel a bit funny about that. Anyhow, what else? Oh yeah, somebody said, and I think this is a really valid point, I'm not sure actually how to do with this one, is that you know, who do you decide to subscribe to? You can't subscribe to anybody. I mean, I think I subscribe to about 170 people. So and I'm friends with about the same number. So if I wanted to join their networks, if all those people went private and I wanted to maintain the same levels of contact, I would have to shell out whatever that is, 170 times $10 a month, $1,700 a month, which is a bit exorbitant, really. I wouldn't want to do that. And I'm not quite sure what the solution to that is. I mean, how I'd kind of imagined it is that there'll be lots and lots of crossover. You know what I mean? So it wouldn't be that the vast majority were shelling out loads of cash, and then a small few were recipients of that. I'd imagine lots of people joining one another's networks, so there was cash going in and cash going out. So yes, you're a member of 270 networks, but you've also got 200 people, 170 let's say, or whatever, but you've got roughly the same amount of people who are membership of your network, so it's coming in and going out, you know what I mean, and there's very little fluctuations. I mean, there might be a little bit of fluctuation, which you would want, I think, to keep it interesting. Little bit of positives and negatives at the top, on the balance sheet. But that's kind of how I'd imagined it, but it does become a logistical nightmare, I think. So I'm not sure if that would work. Anything else on that? Can't think of another thing. I mean, the other thing I was thinking of in relation to this, and this relates to that flatter which I just mentioned, which the modern mystic pointed me to. Flatter being a way of flattering someone financially, but also with a flat rate limit to how much you flatter per month. So for example, you can dedicate a certain number of euros or dollars or whatever, you know, per month, $5 a month, let's say, and that's how much you're going to spend on flattering people that month. And if someone else, if a site you visit, because it can apply to any old site, but can apply to YouTube videos as well. If you see a video, let's say, that you like, you click on a link, and it takes you to a page. It's a bit clunky right now, but it takes you to a page where you can flatter that person, which means that a percentage of that flat fee that you paid a month, that $5 a month that you put into the system, will go to them as a micro payment. Obviously, the more people you flatter in a particular month, the less they get, each individual gets. The pie gets sliced thinner. But it's something, you know what I mean? If you only flatter one person that month, $5 goes that direction. I mean, I think that would be an interesting system to play around with. I mean, I joined the organisation and I've tried messing about with the links. I'm not sure if it worked actually. But I mean, something like that you could even include in comments. And some I think if you're I think WordPress and Blogger do allow you to embed flatter buttons not only on pages but on comments. So if somebody makes a comment that you think is particularly valuable, you can flatter the comment, which is really interesting, I think. So at the moment, commenters have got very, I mean, yeah, they can get positive, you know, thumbs up and thumbs down, but it'd be nice if that was part of the flattering system too, wouldn't it, don't you think? Anyway, that's pretty much it, really. I mean, I just think that the freeness is an illusion. That's the first thing. That freeness is an illusion. We are paying for this stuff. There's no doubt about it. But at the moment, all the cash is all sitting at the top of the system and is being distributed. It's coming in at the top, you know, back from advertisers, and is being drip fed a little bit from the top down to partners, particularly the really high view count partners. The top 20, you know who I'm talking about. I think to make it interesting for people at our level, financially interesting and financially viable to do something with, I don't know what that would be exactly, you would need to inject the cash in at a lower level. You know what I mean? Inject the cash at the level of individual users, either through flattering or through membership-only networks or something like that, to get some kind of distribution of capital moving around at the low level of the system, rather than, as I say, just shoveled at the top, really. Anyway, that's that. Thanks very much for the comments, it was really useful. I will try and find a way to talk again about this because I quite like it. I always chew my fingernails when I do these long drives, but not every single time. It's about a 6-hour drive, this, and that's just the right length of time to get your fingernails just right, I think. I haven't done this hand yet. I've still got a couple of hours to go. I'm just thinking about intuition again, and I'm thinking about intuition in relation to performance. I tried to make this video last week before, it didn't come out terribly well, but and this again might be a rehearsal, but I'm thinking about the intuitive state, or the version that I'm thinking about in terms of intuition, as a kind of a psychophysical condition, a psychophysical state, a state of that articulates a certain kind of relationship between the mind and the body together. That's kind of how I'm thinking of it, and I'm thinking of it as I say, in relation to performance, as one of a number of psychophysical states which has a bearing on the way one performs certain activities, particularly in the case of intuition, particular social activities. And I suppose from this I'm coming out of thinking about psychophysics, the psychophysical conditions appropriate to my own field, which is theatre. Because within theatre, a lot of the training of performers, actors or performers of any kind, really, you know, isn't just about training the body, although that's obviously part of it, or training the voice or whatever, and again that's part of it. It's also about training, what's called psychophysical training or psychophysiological training, which is, as I say, about identifying and optimizing a number of states of the mind and body together, and, you know, becoming proficient at adopting those states and using the relationships of mind and body and ultimately of environment to perform better at various tasks. A lot of the research from that, because it does exist a lot within theatre, you know, all theatre training techniques have got a lot of this stuff built into it. But a lot of the hard research actually doesn't come out of theatre and that kind of performance, it comes out of sport performance. Mainly because there's a lot more money in sports research than there is in theatre research. And particularly about optimising the performance of certain athletes, elite athletes, where the real money is. Because I mean, what people say at the top end of sports is that if you're an elite athlete, there isn't much really physiologically to distinguish between one athlete and another at the top of their game, really. You know, who wins or loses on the day is entirely down to their psychological condition or their psychophysiological condition, not just the way that their body is. There's far more variations in one individual's performance. As I say, at the top of any particular sport, there's far more variation in one person's performance than there is across the averages of you know, the top 5, let's say. And that level of variation can't be the body, because you know, bodies don't change that much or that fast. So it can only be the mind game that's being played, which is why there's so much literature around it, you know, in a game of tennis, in a game of golf, all this kind of stuff. And why there's slogans like, you know, just do it, the Nike slogan, don't think about it, just do it, you know. It's an assertion of a particular mind state to get yourself into, and that's just a kind of vernacular version of it. And there's millions spent every year on, you know, assessing how to get yourself into a particular state. There's quite a lot of research been done on flow, which comes out of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's research, as a particularly optimal state to be in if you're engaged in certain sporting activities. Quite a lot been spent on the alpha state, which is a kind of brainwave pattern that seems to correspond to a particular set of masteries. And not just positive optimizations, but the elimination of negative mind states, again, particularly things like self-consciousness, which again obviously has a bearing on what I do as working in theatre. If you want to be really good at something, you've got to get out your own way. So you've got to, you know, if you're going to release the potential that your optimal psychophysiological processes provide, as I say, you have to get out your own way, so being self-conscious is detrimental to optimal performance. So again, there's lots of training methods to do with that, you know, which both are very closely to things like meditation or you know, those kind of practices, really. Anyway, but that's, in a sense, that's just context. I mean, the bit that I'm interested in relation to this conversation about intuition, which I guess it's yourself, Laura Layla, a few other people have talked about that, is you know, the role of intuition within performance. I guess I'm speaking largely in terms of theatre here, but perhaps also sports performance for some sports. You know, a really good football player I think is very intuitive. There was a great documentary on about 2 years ago about Wayne Rooney, the footballer, and he is absolutely, well at that time at least, he was absolutely brilliant at knowing where the ball was going to go. You know, he could just be in the right place, or he could punt the ball apparently into free space and just kind of know that a person was running into that space. It was fantastic, and it suggests a kind of intuitive knowledge of the way the game is playing itself out, which would be very difficult to put into words and very difficult to make explicit. But he seems to have a feel for the way that the overall pattern of the game is being played, and as I say, is able to something pulled over there. Seemed able to work intuitively, and the same is true for actors. You know, really good actors and performers of all stripes, really, on stage performers of all stripes. Again, seem to demonstrate a lot of intuition. I guess it's most self-evident with things like improvisations. I mean, improv now, like improv comedy particularly, is very formulaic. But if you see really good improvisers, whether doing comedy or other kinds of improvisations, it does look like magic. You know, how is this person possibly, or how is this group of people collectively working together, seeming to just generate a story, characters, situations, punchlines out of the air, And again, I think just as Wayne Rooney can spot the way a game is moving and punt a ball into the space, knowing that somebody will be there in time to pick it up, so a group of performers working together know how to you can just sense the way the whole thing is moving and can throw a line into that, knowing that someone will be coming around from a different direction to pick up that line and run with it. And it is fantastic to watch. And you get it, of course, in music and dance and all kinds of things, really. Actually, contact improvisation is interesting. Contact improvisation is a dance form, which is somewhat a little bit like a sport in some ways. But it'll take too long to explain. Anyway, do a search for contact improv, that's quite interesting. But I say intuition is really important in that. But not just in terms of improvisation. You know, intuition is also really important for things like comedians or any kind of performers in front of an audience. You know, because if you're performing in front of an audience, you kind of have to keep taking the temperature of the room, you know. And again, a really good comedian, a really good stand-up comedian is fantastic at doing that, and seems able to work with hundreds of people simultaneously, and knows which part of the room to face to deliver a certain line, and knows when to drop it and speak to one person individually and when to open it out. And you know, watching someone work the room that way, again, it's a completely tacit skill, intuitive skill, one that you can't make explicit easily, if at all. It is fantastic to watch. But again, I think it's a psychophysical skill. I don't think there's anything magic about it, any more than Wayne Rooney is truly a magician. It's a psychophysical skill that you're working with. Your mind and your body are working in such a way that your body, which is an incredibly sensitive instrument to things like patterns and things like the you know, people's behaviour, particularly the behaviour of people in crowds. You know, your body is very good at picking that stuff up. And if you're the kind of person who has a well-developed intuition, a fairly seamless mind-body, like psychophysiological relationship, you can use that wisdom. You know, you can use the sensitivity of your own body's responses to its environment, responses to the social situations it's in, as I say, deliver the goods to your brain, and your brain can deliver the goods back out into the world again in the form of wise actions, effortless actions almost, you might say. Anyhow, yeah, intuition. I'll have to think more about that, because I've been trying to do some reading about this as well, so I'll see if I can address it more specifically. But I do think intuition is really important in terms of performance. Rings of Bristol. Just thinking about death, because there have been quite a few videos about death recently, and mortality and immortality. Professor Anton Corey made a response to Zinnia Jones, ZGEM TV's video about immortality. You know, what would it be like to live forever, the kind of transhumanist dream, which I think you were saying that you know, you need death to give yourself meaning. Who else? I know that Zinnia Jones made a follow-up to that, kind of critiquing some of the critiques. What else? Gary said something on his website about it. Yeah, quite a bit about that, I think, really. I mean, one of the things that I thought about, I guess this is something for you, Corey, is that for me at least, that's not. This isn't exactly true, actually. As I'm saying that, I can feel it not being true in my head. But it feels like there isn't death that gives life meaning, it's birth, you know what I mean? The surprise that we're here at all, that we're being cast here into the world as... Who says that? Heidegger? Probably. That we are cast into the world, we find ourselves behind the wheel of a large automobile, as David Byrne, the well-known philosopher, said. And we think, how do I work this? How did I get here? Where does this highway go to? You know, I think to myself, my God, what have I done? You know, that's for me, that's the mystery and the challenge. It's not really actually. It's not really a mystery or a challenge, let me just qualify that. I think it's that experience which drives a lot of people to look for meaning. I guess because our lives are so surrounded by things that are created for meanings. You know, all the stuff that we've created, this steering wheel, this camera, the car I'm sitting in, the road I'm driving on, the signposts, the trees that have been planted by the roadside, windbreaks, everything is here because it's a meaning, because it has a meaning, or its meaning is in its placement, its beginnings. They don't have meanings by their endings, you know what I mean? I mean, obviously a road kind of has a meaning by its spatial ending. This road has a meaning because of where it takes me, where that final terminus is. But in terms of the temporal ending, these things don't have meanings in their temporal endings, they have meanings in their temporal beginnings. And I think and perhaps all of us as humans, perhaps we've kind of inherited that, you know, and a little bit of a version of the argument from complexity, or the whatever it is, that argument you find in some theologies. But we can't really believe we're here without there being a reason for it. For me to be here, I must have had a reason. Why was I born? Why am I alive? Not why will I die so much. And the other thing about dying is I don't really believe it. I'm not sure if I believe, well, actually I kind of believe it, obviously, because I've known people die, but my brother died. I've seen other people die. One of my mates, when I used to ride motorbikes many years ago, him and another lad I didn't know very well died by riding their motorbike into the side of a caravan at high speed. So I've met, you know, I've known people who are no longer here. But even then, I'm not sure if I believe it. You know, maybe I won't believe it until I'm actually on my deathbed, thinking, "Oh, this is it. I'm dying then, am I? Oh my God, really? Whoa!" Yeah. And there's the kind of stories around that. There's that, I don't know if it's a Zen story or just some story from Buddhism, about the guy who falls off the edge of a cliff, and he manages just to grab onto a branch on his way down, yeah, but he can see the branch tearing, and underneath him, there are tigers prowling around. So he knows he's only got seconds left before the branch breaks, and he falls for his body to be broken and consumed by tigers. But he notices growing next to the branch there's strawberries. I don't know why they would be growing, but they are. And he picks one of those strawberries and puts it in his mouth. And the closing line is how good that strawberry tastes. How good that strawberry tastes. And you know, the idea is that, you know, there's nothing like our impending death to force us to enjoy life. You know, or to force us to live for the moment, to be on the wire. But most of the time we're not like that, you know. I can't remember the last time I fell over a cliff with tigers underneath. It's not something that happens very often, really. And even those little momentary adrenaline surges you get, you know, when you make a mistake or some guy cuts you off and you think you're going to crash, they're pretty few and far between, and they don't give me that sense of a meaningful moment. I don't get it. And the other thing is about people who have those experiences but survive them, you know, near-death experiences. They're interesting, aren't they? There's probably a market for, it's so mercantile, but there's probably a market for someone who can invent a near-death experience. I mean, a real one, not just a roller coaster ride that frightens the life out of you, but a real near-death experience. Because people who come back from those often seem to come back quite changed, I think, don't they? You know, I know there's been some kind of research into, you know, how people approach their lives after they've been through what experiences, and they tend to be much more compassionate, much less concerned with material gain, much more tolerant, more spiritual, you know, in the non-religious sense, or even in the religious sense. And here I'm thinking of what he called David Wren Lewis, Stephen Wren Lewis. Somebody Wren Lewis anyway, he wrote this little essay called The Dazzling Dark. He had a near-death experience. I think he was travelling through India and he was given something that was poisonous, and it took him right to the edge of his own death, but he managed to survive somehow. And when he came back to consciousness, he describes it, he says, he felt that the back of his head was missing. The back of his head was missing, and the back of his head was just kind of open to the world. You know, just open to the world in a way, back to Heidegger, open to the world in a really completely physical way. That was his sense of it, and he got all kind of spiritual as a result of that. But whatever it was, you know what I mean. I don't think he believed things that aren't true, but maybe he did. But he certainly had a changed outlook on life as a result of its impending end. Yeah, so I don't think we are constantly perusing our own death, except in a really abstract way. You know what I mean? I think, as I kind of suggested in one of my previous videos, I think we do kind of, when we talk about it at least, we talk about our lives as if they were stories. Stories that were, as Kierkegaard says, that we live forward but experience backwards. You know, we only experience them in retrospect. We're all travelling arse first into the unknown, trying to pick up the pieces, repair the things that have been broken, and build a story out of the shambles of our lives. I think we are kind of doing that. And because stories that we know have endings, I guess we anticipate the ending of our story. But I'm not sure if that gives it meaning, except to the sense that, you know, you can really only appraise something when it's finished. I don't know. Anyhow, I'm just approaching. I'm approaching Exeter. There's a light aircraft flying overhead. I soon have to turn off for the A30 and head across the moors. See you later. I made a video with my dogs in it yesterday. Guy and Phoebe are in the back here. And when I was a guy who's the male dog, he's kind of protects the female. You know, if there's another dog shows any attention, he gets in the way. And cock blocks, I think, is the expression. Seems to, you know, make sure nothing untoward happens there. But he spared himself, you know what I mean? So he can't get it on. He got his balls taken off him years ago. And because he's got this asthma out against him, because he bit someone, he has to wear a muzzle when he's out in public. So he's basically defanged, you know, he's debollocked and defanged. So I just wonder what goes through his mind, you know, particularly in situations like that, which just seem to be so ripe for with psychology. You know, another little dog's trying to get off with this female, and he's doing everything he can to get in the way of that. I mean, what's he think about, you know? I mean, maybe he doesn't think about anything, he's just a dog. Maybe they've got no inner life at all, and if they have, maybe it's just feeling. In which case, what's he feeling like, you know? And is he thinking, gee, okay, I've got no bollocks and I can't bite anything, but it's a beautiful world. Is he thinking that, you know? Beautiful day, trees are green, snowdrops are coming up under the hedges. Is that what he thinks? Or is he thinking, yeah, I can't wait to get back and have my dinner. I like pedigree chum, but I think I like win a lot better. Is that the kind of, if his feelings had words, would those be the words, you know? Or is it, you know, I've got any bollocks, so I can't have sex with this female here, but when I get home, you know, my dad will tickle my tummy like this, and that'll be fantastic. You know, is he thinking that? The equivalent of that? Or is he just thinking the equivalent of, for fuck's sake, you know? I've got no bollocks, I can't open my mouth properly. Somebody put a fucking bullet through my brain, please. What's the point? I'm saying this because he looks a bit depressed lately. He's been very slow. He might be ill, I don't know. I'll take him to the vet. He might just need deworming, I don't know. But he's walking a lot slower now he gets older. He hasn't got the stamina he used to have, and he's not eating terribly well. So it might be he just needs worming, I don't know. Maybe we all need worming. Yeah, I'll get myself dewormed when I get down here. Thunderf00t. That last video you made, Thunderf00t, about the beauty of the Large Hadron Collider or whatever it was, kind of a response to Venom Fang X. Absolutely terrible. Terrible, 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 terrible. I mean, it's just saying, you want beauty, we got beauty. You want that, we got that. I mean, that's just no advert for science. Really, I don't think. The one before that, you know, where you're singing the praises of Isaac Newton. but saying, yeah, he was good at the science stuff, but he was crap at the religion thing. You know, that kind of sentiment. Completely missed the point there, I think. Terrible. You need to diversify your portfolio, Thunderfoot. Take heed of those other videos I made. Set up the Thunderfoot Foundation for Science, Reason and Ponage. Or something like it, you know? Something that allows you to do some bits of sciencey stuff, some bits of making fun of creationist stuff, within on a social media platform. Get some other voices in who've got some other ideas, because you're a bit of a one-note samba right now, mate. And that's a shame. That's what it looks like to me. I'm sure this isn't intentional, but what it looks like to me is that both you and Venomfang X are just doing your Punch and Judy routine that got you all those subscribers in the first place. Because let's face it, the reason why both of you have got the numbers of subscribers you've got is because you set up this. I don't think you did it. I don't suppose you did it intentionally. That you set up this good and evil, they put on faces and they turn to people thing. You know what I mean? Where it's just like a little bit of a WWE match between the Christian and the atheist, and it's fine, you know what I mean, but after a while you get tired of watching the same old Punch and Judy, and if you're continuing just for that reason, which it's sad to say that's what it looks like, then that's a shame. That is a real shame. And it's probably the case now that Venomfang X has got more atheist subscribers than you do, so wow, that's a shame. Yeah, so that's the other thing I've been talking about. It'll still allow you to do all that stuff. You'll get a little bit of cash out of it. You know, it'll get other people involved. If we don't do it, the Christians will, and they'll cock it up. You know, they'll cock it up. And we want to get in there first. The atheists and the voices of reason need to organise. Anyway, that's enough. At funerals, they say this thing, in the midst of life, we are in death, don't they? I have to say, I've never really understood that phrase. In the midst of life, we are in death. I guess it means that, you know, even though, like I was saying in one of my previous videos, even though, you know, whilst you're alive, there doesn't feel like any alternative, you know what I mean? It's not, all we know is being alive, really. Even whilst in that situation, you know, we do come across death. You know, either I come across a dead rabbit floating in a canal, or a dead crow in the branches of a tree, or someone close to us or not so close to us dies. So I guess that's what it means. You know, in the midst of this being alive thing, you're suddenly confronted, not by the inanimate, because we're surrounded by the inanimate the whole time. We're suddenly confronted by something which is neither inanimate, like rocks, but it's not alive either. It's this other thing, you know. Well, that's a weird third state of matter, isn't it? It's not alive and it's not inanimate, it's dead. In the midst of life, we're suddenly confronted. I don't know why we're in death, I don't know, I don't get that. I mean, if anything, it would be the reverse, wouldn't it? I would have thought. In the midst of death, we are in life. Because you're dead a lot longer than you're alive, aren't you? You know, from the beginning of the universe, whenever that was, 13.5 billion years ago, up to 54 years ago, I was not around. I was effectively dead. And in another 20, 30 years, whatever it is, I will cease to be alive, and the rest of the universe will go on without me for another, I don't know, whatever, 37 billion years, let's say. There's this little tiny slice in the middle, little tiny sliver of time, in which, for reasons best known to itself, the universe has thrown me up like an undigested bagel or something. I don't know, something undigestible. Which is a bit weird, really, isn't it? You know, it's like this weird little set of probability waves. Does that make sense? Probability wave? I don't know. And then they're constantly forming and reforming, and just a little blip in the middle of all that. I just happens to have my name on it. I'm not saying there's anything that follows from that. I certainly wouldn't build a philosophy around it, or a religion around it. And I don't see if I'd give that particular slice of time any more value than any other slice of time in the great scheme of things. But it makes more sense, I think, in that case, to say, in the midst of death, we are in life. passages say that at christenings, or whatever the opposite of a funeral is, you know, a birthday party. In the midst of death, we are in life. We should all raise our glasses and drink. In the midst of death, we are in life, but not whilst we're driving.